G'day everyone, welcome back to Free Kick, the AFLW Fantasy Podcast. Today you're joined by me, Liam, and a full chock-a-block crowded house of hosts. We've got Will, Mel and Jono here with us. Now, it has become a running theme on this podcast that the first person gets thrown to is some smug fan of a team that's won, and unfortunately this season it's been Jono almost every week because Hawthorn aren't doing a lot of losing. Jono, how are you going this week?
I'm feeling pretty good. We've got the Hawks just tearing it up, top of not just the McClellan Trophy overall, but almost guaranteed top four as long as we can pull, one win or just not too bad losses from here. I think it's very hopeful. This is incredible to see.
I am extremely envious. The Bombers could do with an extra $1 million, given that we're now spending, $3 million to upgrade Windy Hill, which if you've been there, I don't reckon's enough.
That's good to hear, though. Some people will actually be able to sit down and not freeze their butts off.
Well, they might freeze their butts off or they might get some splinters. Either or, it's not exactly a pleasant experience, even if the nostalgia is enjoyable. Will, how are you at this point of the season? Geelong picked up a surprising win against the reigning premiers.
Yeah, I was thrilled with the win, but I was disappointed I wasn't there because I ended up choosing between two games and I didn't go see my Cats play because I thought, you know what, I don't want to drive 2 hours down to Geelong to watch Geelong get flogged by Brisbane, and karma came right at me, but at least it was in a good way.
Yeah, it was an entertaining game to watch. If only for the play that I think you've noted in our run sheet, which I was also wanting to talk about, which is Michaela Bowen confusing herself and then Poppy Bolts to score the dumbest amazing goal of the year.
It was incredible, and I'll throw to Jono on this one because he's actually written it down as his highlight of the week.
It was incredible. She's just taken this mark, gone back on the mark, not realised she's gone the wrong way. Poppy Bolts is going, oh, you're supposed to be over there, not realising, no, it's going to be play on, go tackle her. And then she just goes, oh, okay, runs off and kicks a goal from 50. Hell of a goal.
A hell of a goal, and also day. Just a completely broken thing to watch on a football field. Will, then, if that wasn't your highlight, did you have one specific one from the week? I'm outraged that Michaela Bowen's goal isn't actually the one written down.
Yeah, look, that was a fantastic highlight and one of the highlights of the year. But for me, I did go to Victoria Park to watch the Pies and the Noffy show, which, let's be honest, the Noffy show is a bit disappointing this week, only in the 130s. What's going on?
Matinee performance.
But my highlight was actually getting a footy card signed by not just Anne Hatchard, but also Georgie Hatchard. So I got the dual Hatchard signed footy card, which I was pretty stoked about.
That's pretty solid. Mel, did you get to enjoy some football and or a highlight of the weekend?
Yes, I got both. I got to watch Freo win in a game that they definitely should have won, the 7th Derby, which was always entertaining to watch Freo smash
Freo
West
win.
Coast. Yep. back to back. So love that. That was very entertaining to watch. And then also got to see Noffy do Noffy things in person. She's just so great to watch. Watching her little waddle, watching her little run, watching her beg for the ball from just a few metres in front of you. It's just so entertaining. Like, I was technically there to support Collingwood, hanging out with a bunch of Collingwood supporters, but Team Noffy, she's so entertaining.
And I also got to say, I did manage to get a photo with Noffy well after the game, and also asked whether she was aware of AFL Fantasy, to which she laughed and very quickly said no before heading very swiftly off to the team bus. So I'm going to guess that the answer is actually a yes to that one.
I suspect so.
She does play like she's aware of the stats accumulation that she does do, and that's probably the second or third time I've heard her just wave away any noticing of how much she accumulates the ball. I sadly didn't get to go and watch some football on the weekend. I had made plans to go and try and see North Melbourne play Essendon. Glad I didn't. Had some other things crop up. Did not want to go and watch the Bombers just play so frustratingly.
You wouldn't have been able to see the Bombers play, unfortunately. You've just seen North Melbourne do what they do.
North Melbourne play a training drill.
Yeah.
Honestly, the dumbest thing is we have looked at incompetent at times this year. Horrendous. We looked doubly as good against North as we did against Fremantle. And we're actually being able to control the ball. It was just any time it got over halfway, it was like, oh, well, nothing.
See, you say this as a Bomber supporter. I can fully relate as a Geelong supporter who has seen my team beat the reigning premiers Brisbane, draw against probably the premiership favourite in North Melbourne, and also lose in possibly the most putrid game of football you'll ever watch against Carlton.
They just
want to keep you on your toes. You know?
It's
you never know what you're going to get.
That game was also a wedding present from memory. I think that was the same weekend, no?
Yeah,
that might have been.
And I'm not disappointed to have missed it in person. I will say that.
I'm sure you've not missed it in your psyche, sadly.
No.
Well, we'll put aside those disappointing thoughts and move across to the shipping report. As we have done, for the last few weeks, we're going to go in reverse order. Now, I can't actually figure out what someone has scored in here because, Mel, it's got you down scoring 1,450 points, which is impressive, but I believe incorrect.
That's a top 10 score for the week,
did.
which is impressive.
That would be instead, I just really wanted to look good. That would be my rank.
Yeah. What did you score for the week, Mel, so that I can figure out who I need to throw to first? Polished machine that we are.
1265. So, Jono.
Yes!
Yes.
Jono, I'm going to throw to you first. How did you go this week? What did you score? What's your rank? Give us your good calls, your bad calls.
I wasn't too far off. It was a 1,259, which sadly slid me back 45 spots to 1,465. So I am behind Mel. Yeah, but look, I've set myself a new goal, and it is going to be, there's 2 weeks left. I will be either in the top 1,000 or I will be outside the 2,000 mark. There will be no other scenarios here. I am going super high risk from this point out.
Just behind Mel. I thought you were a 1259 on your rank, and I was like, Drats, how did you get so far ahead of me? Oh, I was totally reading the wrong rows.
No. I filled out the table correctly.
Yeah.
So that's
the difference here.
Yeah.
And for the listeners, just to be fully aware, this is a template table that we have used in our run sheet doc every single week, and the rows have not moved.
Hasn't changed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you've had a 1259. What was your good call for the week?
Look, there weren't a lot of good calls. I think the best one was I was trying to figure out which of the players I trusted to bounce back after some pretty poor performances, and Georgie Prasparkas was one that I thought, you know what, she's coming back from injury. Maybe it's just taking a while to bounce back. And she looked very, very good against the Lions for an 87, I think it was. I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that decision not to trade her out. My bad call, on the other hand, was my trades. All week, I was sitting on Ash Saint coming into my side. And at the last minute, I decided, you should bring in the Hawk and Anya McDonough. The only reason I wasn't getting her was because I owned her in other leagues, and I didn't want to mess around with putting all my eggs in one basket. My only saving grace is that I traded out a rookie in Pounga who scored a 38, and I went to McDonough with a 39. So technically, I improved my team.
Ash Saint really has been a thorn in our side this year, Jono, because I traded her in for the 2-3 weeks where she didn't score well, and now you have not traded her in when she did score well. So
I brought her in for those bad scores too. She's really she's done a number on me, but I will be finding a way to get her back in, I think. We'll see. Speaking
of doing a number, Anya McDonough had a number done to her. I would say outside of the realms of the boundaries of the rulebook by Pepper Randall. I have not seen someone mugged so consistently, so frequently, to only then maybe get 2 or 3 free kicks in her favour. Like, I would have said
outrageous,
front on contact 3 or 4 times, like
holding
arms
every other
chopped,
time.
Held.
Yeah.
I think there was one where Pepper Randall did like I'm just going to swing you down to the ground. The ball then just goes over McDonough's hand, and she's lying on the ground afterwards, just arms both raised, being like, how is this possible?
Yeah. I'm glad we ran over the top of them in the end, because that first half was ridiculous.
Yes, that was very frustrating to watch. And your blind side?
Look, I've been trying to figure out the blind side because really it's how my team has fallen apart this year. But I think it was probably...
If that was me, that wouldn't be a blind side.
It was probably the Lions falling down to Geelong. I don't understand Geelong's season at all. I know we've talked about it, but it's very hard to predict when they're going to be good and when they're going to be bad because their best is elite and their worst is just terrible.
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate summation of Geelong's season. Now, I'm assuming that, Mel, I now get to throw to you because you've just pipped Jono for your score.
Yes, slightly. So my rank is 1450. So that's pretty much the same as I was last week. I might have shuffled down a little bit, but I was up to the top 1,000 for most of the games, and then I slid on back. So not great, but my goal is to jump those 450 or so spots and finish in the top 1,000. Only got 2 weeks to do it, so ambitious goal, but let's see what I can do. My good call was bringing in Gabby Newton. I was a little bit nervous about bringing in a Freo player because that always makes it...
Docker.
Well, sorry, that threw me. To bring in a Docker, I guess, because it makes it intense viewing. Like, I want to be able to enjoy the game and not put all of my attention on one or two specific players. But fantasy-wise, that worked well. I'll take 102. She can stay in my side till the end of the season.
That's a controversial take.
You'd reckon.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to keep a high-performing defender for another 2 weeks. And then my bad call was, in order to do something like that, like bring in Newton and have a great game there, I had to put put a couple of rookies on my field. Dana Finn I backed because I knew Carlton was going to have a good week for scoring. But Wendland, Wendland was not good. She got 29, and that's 2 weeks in a row I've had a very poor performing midfielder. So somehow I'm matching Jono, who I assume is doing a lot better than me despite having 2 rookies get like 20s on the midfield.
You've got to remember that the forward he traded in scored 39. But
that was
what
my
I did
third
just
highest
notice...
scoring forward while we're at it.
Wow.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
The thing I wanted to note, Mel, was who did you have at M5 in week 7 that was a flop from Adelaide?
It was an excruciating watch yesterday, I've got to tell you that. Boyle Carr decided to
She's
rock up and play.
outscored Caitlin Wendland.
Yeah.
Amy Boyle Carr scored 37.
Sitting on my utility spot, could have put her on. Yeah. And Will traded her in after... We ended the podcast being like, do not. He traded her in
I
anyway.
made money. So
yeah,
she's gone up 15K.
And her total value for the season is 15K. So, sell her while she's hot because you don't want to lose that. Yeah, not good.
Oh, that's a very funny bad call. Now, Mel, your blind side is an interesting one.
I was spewing watching that game being like, here's my only kind of pod-ish Randall in this game. Everyone's got Noffy as their captain. Randall, you better go big. And then seeing her have that collision, was it with EJ near the broadcast wing?
It was with EJ, Eliza James.
Who went off concussed, and Randall looked like a chipmunk. Her cheek was so huge. But she was standing, when she went off, she was just kind of standing on the sideline, still got her mouth guard in. I was like, she's coming back on. She doesn't want to go off. And then, lo and behold, she
cannot
appears.
believe she came back on.
I can't believe she came back on either. She probably shouldn't have, but alas, somehow.
If anyone is watching this, like listening back to this now, like go on Chelsea Randall's Instagram to get a photo of what she now looks like. She is not a chipmunk. She has a large heaving growth out the side of her face. Like her face width has doubled.
Ouch.
It is enormous, but apparently no structural damage, which is a miracle. Having broken that part of my face, it is not hard to break the bones in there.
It looked almost exactly the same as when you did yours, Liam. And as soon as she came off, she walked past us, and I said to Mel, I was like, that looks like a broken cheek. And somehow she's played through it. And
apparently not broken it either.
Yeah.
She is made of some stern, strong stuff.
But it must be said, that contest all around, both Chelsea Randall frequently voted the most courageous player in the competition, but Eliza James as well, running back with the flight. Amazing contest.
It was. Now,
but
talking of stern stuff, Will...
Oh,
yeah, Mel?
I was just going to say, not an amazing finish. because although she came back on, she got me a 33. Better than a 17,
Yeah.
I think she went off with, but, could have been better.
I was going to let that one slide through to the keeper for you on your behalf. And I just weren't going to talk about the score she ended up on. I was going to say, speaking of stern stuff, Will, you're a big improver this week.
Big improver. I've managed to score 3,782 to move my rank up to 1267. So yes, I've managed to pit Mel by 2 points with a 1267. My rank is slowly creeping up. I've gone up another 140 places. So I think
We will not turn our nose up at that.
getting into that sort of top 2,000. 2 weeks to go. It's going to be unlikely, but you know what? We're going to give it a go. Similar to Jono, I didn't have a whole lot of good calls. I also trusted in Georgie Prasparkas and Elise Parker from last week. And both of them did me very well. But when it comes to the bad calls, I had a bit of a similar week to Jono in that Maeve Chaplin didn't have a great week last week after I traded her in. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to go a little bit bold and I'm going to hope that Elizabeth Georgia-Stathis can follow up. Scored a 53, considering her price not terrible, but that's 6 points less than Chaplin. But I did that to a forward-moving Friswell up to Alice O'Loughlin, who scored a enormous 51. So
Hefty.
so
51.
16 points more than Friswell, meaning that those trades got me a net gain of 10 points.
Nice.
That's not ideal, but it's better than Jono's, albeit from one trade, 1 point from
That is true.
Pounger
And those
to
10 points
McDonough.
have got me from being behind Jono and Mel to being ahead of them. So
Correct.
really, it's an overall win.
Vital.
But my blind side was Georgia Garnett scoring a 25 in the forward line. I thought my biggest worry was another Giants forward in Michaela Pounger, and it wasn't a great matchup, to be fair, against Hawthorn, but 25 points was very disappointing from Sugg. So I think she might have to be on the out this week.
Yeah, she lost that time behind the ball, which had been supplementing her scores or the tougher matchups. Definitely going to contribute to that. Now, moving along to the next highest rated team, and it's the Tamara Smith of it all with a 1285. Now, it's down 49 ranks to 404. Now, there's no good call. There's only a bad call, which is forgot to make the trades. So that went well. That meant that Tamara Smith, oh boy, did she have a stinky one. Up until the very last minutes of the fourth quarter, I think she was on like 15 with 6 minutes to go, and she's finished on 43. To save her score. Also had a lovely 25 from Gab Pound that we traded in the week prior. So not exactly a spectacular week.
I suspect I know why you didn't put the trades in, Liam, as the person in charge of entering the trades. And I think it has to do with the fact that we've now got a new highest ranked team on the podcast.
Thank goodness. Can I just say, before we talk about my team, to be honest, I remembered like about 3/4 time, or like during the third quarter of the Hawthorn GWS game, and then I looked and the bench and all of the players I would have wanted to downgrade or sideways, gone. I'm like, I don't want to get rid of Gould, Randall, Tripodi, Hamilton, Smith, Prasparkas, like
Marinoff?
No, I'm not sabotaging the team like that. No, I'm not doing that. So yes, I wanted to make trades, but at this point I was just like, honestly, I'm just going to make it worse. And the trades I was considering 100% would have. Look, I had a 1329, which put me at a round rank of just as hair over 900 and moved my rank up 29 spots to 341. My good call, now, Will, you're going to love this. Gilroy. Eileen Gilroy just doing things that I could barely have hoped for. Traded her in for Maeve Chaplin. Now, there's some other Melbourne defenders that I probably should have traded instead, given Chaplin was a bit better. But definitely benefited from Eileen Gilroy kicking 3 goals, looking amazing, beating up on a pretty lackluster GWS team. Felt great. My bad call was also in that game. It was Anya McDonough. That one hurt. I made points, though, because Anya McDonough scored 39 and Zali Friswell scored a 37 or 36. So I too netted out positively from my trades.
Really playing with the margins this week.
Look, the other trade that I did netted me like more than 35 points, so we will take it. And then...
Especially considering how all of our other trades have gone. We're talking 1 point, 10 points total. 30 points. Jeez,
that is actually incredible. Huge. That's as good as you could possibly have a trade go.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, the other bad call that I made is like ultimately I had been, on a few other pods this week on the Thursday night on-air recording talking about some of the kind of $1 million players that you could trade in. Ultimately, I probably should have tried to... I could have just held Friswell, to be honest, and gone Zali Goldsworthy up to one of Abby Dowrick or M. Bates, who both scored their highest scores of the season and would have netted me a lot more points. Zali had an absolute stinker of a game, couldn't take a mark. But we'll get to some of that kind of trading later in the episode. Now, my blind side, just quickly, premium defenders sitting in the bin. Goldrick with a 49. Dizzy Darcy with a 26 were obviously in my team, and then Charlie Thomas, who's another very highly owned premium defender, with a 44, and then some underwhelming scores from some other premium defenders. Newman only 67 and Webster only with 59. Certainly surprising to see how many of them underwhelmed this week.
Again, maybe me not reading the team sheet, but I thought this was your backline. I was like, damn, 1, very good, 2, What a week for unfortunate low scores.
Thankfully, that's not my defensive line because I have Ailey Sheeran, which is very helpful. And I have Gilroy and
she had a good week.
Serene Watson, who was fine. But yes, we'll talk about some of that stuff later. Now, Will, we finally got through the shipping report across to the Watch and Wait scoreboard.
Oh, the Watch and Wait scoreboard. Fairly similar this week. We still have the same top coach, Brett W. Kiwi 5 on top with 13,699 points. They are streaking out in front. It's going to take some real chasing down. They also had a very impressive week score of 1491, overall 5th for the week, so really extending out that lead. Top score was by Tom, the Prosparkus Express. That was of the Georgie variety based on their Geelong jumper. Scored 1545, which is another massive score. So now looking at the top 100, we've got Callie M's Tiddlywinks team sitting at 100 with 12,891 total. And you required 1341 to stay in. So even with a really good score this week, Liam, you still wouldn't have stayed in the top 100.
No, well, I wouldn't have. I've gone 12 points back, and I think I'm going to put that entirely down to Zali Goldsworthy and Anya McDonough. I'm going to blame them specifically and not me for having made the trades to get them in the first place in the last couple of weeks.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've got 41 players in our free kick league that are in the top 100, including that 100 benchmark Kelly. So well done to everyone in that league who is sticking in the business end of the rankings.
Thank you very much, Will. Now, we now get to move across to hot topics. The whole theme of today is ownership. We've got 2 weeks left. People are going to have targets now for where they want to finish for the rest of the season. And part of what you're thinking about is, all right, what's my team look like? Who do I own? Who do I need to own for the rest of the season to match it with people? Who do I want to own because they're a unique player who's scoring really well? I can really capitalize. Who are some of the ones that are very highly owned that are underperforming to jump off to get that unique player in? Before we go and talk about a whole stack of options, though, I think we're just going to have a little bit of a talk about a philosophy of the trades that you make at this point of the year, where we're starting to consider ownership. I'll throw to you first. In terms of obviously you have a goal for the end of the season. At this point, are you doing something specific with your trades to try and achieve it, or are you just trying to do it the same way you've been doing it all season?
Look, I think it really depends on how much you want to try and climb and what lengths you're going to go to try and achieve it. If you're sitting well outside that top 100, as I am, you may as well try something a bit different.
Is that more different than already having Sarah Verrier in your team?
Well, I was quite literally about to say, I've never been afraid to do something a bit loopy, but we're now officially in the silly season. And if you're going to chase points, you may as well chase some big scores, drop a few players from your team that have been underperforming. Prime candidate would be, say, Charlie Rowbottom, highly owned player who's been underperforming. Big stack of cash there. What do you do with it? So I'm definitely thinking about looking at some alternative options this week, as opposed to some of the players that are more highly owned up the top.
I think that's a fairly expected strategy as well, but I think that also it's true that you have to start thinking laterally. Jono, I'm going to quickly throw to you. Oh, Mel, do you have some alternative position that you would prefer to take?
I'd love to know the average ownership of your team. I mean, difficult to do right now, but it's going to be low.
Work on it in the background.
I'm definitely going to work on it in the background. If you hear gears turning, that's my brain trying to do maths at
nice.
late
So
at night. But
in about 55 minutes, you can chime in.
I'm a scientist, not a mathematician.
Yes. Now, Jono, you've made it clear kind of in our conversations across all forms of fantasy that you can get too obsessive over numbers at this point of the season.
Jono specifically?
What do you mean by that?
Jono specifically.
I don't get obsessive over numbers. I think other people do.
I think you can get over obsessed.
Yeah. So obviously not this season because I'm not ranked anywhere near. But in the years that I've been at the top, my strategy has been let other people make the mistakes, because other people will try and do crazy things to try and jump up the ranks, and more often than not, it fails. That's why we don't trade these people in at the start of the season. We do it at the end of the season.
You're welcome, John.
So, if I was at the moment sitting in the top 100, maybe if I was in second, I'd be taking some bigger risks. But for most people, the top 100 is the aim, and I would be doing whatever I can to try and minimize the risk of me falling out, and that is getting the highly owned players. Even if I was sitting in, 120th, 130th, playing a straight bat and just hoping that some people in the top 100 have worse teams than what I've already got. And that's hard to gauge. I think it's very team dependent, but it's sort of looking at, am I going to be the one that takes the big risks, or am I going to let someone else do it? So because of where I'm currently sitting in 1400th, I'm going to be taking the big risks because I've set myself that goal of 1000. But I can see a lot of argument for not doing that and letting other people fall away around you if you think you've got a good team.
Mel, are you thinking about attacking the same strategy, given you and Jono are, two ships very much sailing right next to each other at the moment?
Tethered
Did
ships.
someone say sailboats?
Catamaran, just two halves of the catamaran.
Yes, that is, yes.
Boat chat. I think that if I were to wait for people above me to make mistakes and let myself rise that way, I'd be waiting a long time, multiple seasons. So I'm definitely going to need to be the one that's doing some crazy moves. However, that does not apply to captains. I think that maybe if you're in a much lower position and you want to do a big jump, captain someone crazy and hope that they go bigger than Noffy, but I will be sticking on the straight and narrow with captaining Noffy until the end of the season, because I don't think that's a season ender if that goes wrong.
I'm definitely going to captain Noffy this week, but next week we're going to have a discussion on that, because I think that is going to be an interesting strategy.
And it's going to be very pertinent as well, because she's going to play the first game up. She plays on the Thursday night, and Adelaide are not going to know probably exactly where they're going to finish on the ladder. So, yeah, there's a full breakdown of that happening. I think my only addition on this theory is part of it is assessing the risk already in your team. Having a look at I might own someone lowly owned. Like, Mel, you own Gabby Newton. I don't think she's a risky player to own. She's just a really handy one because she's very lowly owned. So if she scores well, and like this week, Charlie Thomas has a really quiet week, you're up 60 points. And you've not taken a risky option. She's been consistently over 70 for the past month. The opposite being, like, if you've got someone speculative, like I know Mitch from Ball Boys, another member of the Content Creators Cup, has Neve Kelly at M5 because of the Laura Gardner out. That's a risky player. If you're having to hold on to someone like that, Ivan, forgive me, Mitch, for making your team the example, I'm not throwing too many other risky darts at players that have scored everywhere from 30 to 100 in the last 2 seasons, or in the role that they're currently playing. Or if you're really trying to make it up, like a lot of ground, then maybe you are trying to take another risky stab. But it's about assessing like the risk profile of your team and seeing, okay, I have, 50%, 60%, 70% of players that are owned by more than 20% of the competition, or than 20% of the people that are ranked in front of me or in the top 1,000, 100, whatever. If that number's 50%, then you probably don't need to be going risky this week. It may actually just be straight batting, someone who is popular for good reason, someone who has a low break even, someone that has a great game, versus trying to again chase someone just because you're like, I need to be different.
That's all. I mean, I see why people pay attention to ownership, but to me, ownership is like a second, third, or fourth thing to consider to like confirm a trade, because I wouldn't be putting that above things like, how's their run looking? Does this work with the money that I have? Do I think this player is genuinely going to continue to perform well? Like, I wouldn't be...
Giving it
maybe
primacy.
in certain situations, if you're high on the ladder, you might be taking ownership above those as criteria. But I kind of like to have a consideration of everything else, and then I check the ownership. And if I'm going to check the ownership, it means they're probably not highly owned because... we know who the highly owned players are. So it's more like, okay, they're a 5 to 10, they're a 10 to 15, they're a less than 5. Great. That could screw me, that could do me well, but it's more an afterthought for me. Yeah. Jono?
Yeah, I think I generally agree with what you're saying. I think there's a slightly higher importance at this time of year, but I'm not trading someone in unless I expect them to go well. The other thing, though, is that if I'm talking about the risks I'm willing to take, it probably depends what line they're on. Like, if they're a forward, I'm willing to take a punt because every forward is up and down. Whilst when it's in the midfield, like, that's a spot where I don't want anyone going worse than an 85, because worse than that is going to cost me a lot of points.
Oh, so like my whole midfield.
Like a lot
I
of
only had
people's
one
midfields
midfielder
this
go
week.
over 90 this week, and I was very sad. But to be fair, no one failed. So
Beep boop. I've finished my calculations.
Oh.
Apparently, my average ownership on field is 19.87%, whilst including my bench, it's 15.97.
There you go.
Who's your most unique player, actually?
That is a very good question.
Give him another 20 minutes.
Sorry. We'll have to chat. You go away, do maths, come back when you're finished.
I'm actually
Sending him
fairly
off to do his
certain.
homework.
I'm fairly certain I know the answer. I think it is actually Sarah Veria with 0.6% ownership.
That is very, very
It's
unique.
hard to beat.
But yeah, I agree. Just to kind of wrap up on this kind of theory behind the trades at this time of the year, I agree with Jono. Like, it is very much, it's positional based, or like, if you think a lot of teams have 4 premiums in one line and then one speculative player, you can afford to take a speculative player because that's just kind of, you're just kind of matching and you're just trying to bet on the high side, not probably taking the midfield forward and maybe one defender being a more risky option, kind of going down to a Georgia Stathis, a Karen Peterson, like a lot of people did last week, is kind of what I'm thinking. But it's just making sure you have a good sense of what your team's risk profile is like. And then also just getting a sense of like how many players are scoring well consistently in that position. Well, there ends our philosophy lesson. Now we move across to trade targets and our trade thoughts. So the idea behind this week is it's broken down into 2 general ideas. One is we're going to look at the most highly owned players in each of the positions, and we've kind of broken them down into some buckets. We're going to talk about ones that like we think we might need to consider trading out. And then after that, we're going to talk about some of the players we're going to consider trading in, particularly some of the more lowly owned options. Because I don't think that, like, if you're trading someone out from like let's say you've got Sinead Goldrick and you don't have like Maddie Newman. If you want to trade in Maddie Newman, that's a perfectly reasonable trade to make. I expect her to be highly ranked by the end of the season. But the point of this will be, let's look at some of the more pod type options. Let's talk about some of the ones that we like. So, first off, and before I do actually, I think I need to thank Jaden Popovsky for these ownership statistics. His website, Stats by Jaden, has them broken down by top 100 and top 1,000 ownership, both on field and on the bench, which is extremely helpful for this exercise. We would not have been able to do it without it. First up is we've got the basically every team bucket. So there are 3 players here. Ebony Marinoff, who's in 100% of top 100 teams and in all bar 6 of the top 1,000 teams. And please bring her in for your own sanity.
I just want to say good effort to those 6 people. Like, the rest of your team must be really bloody good.
Or it's been very good at some point and then you've stopped looking at it and it's now slowly sliding back.
I reckon they've captain Mimstrom.
Like that was close enough this week.
Yeah.
That's a good shout.
The other 2 are both forwards. So one is Kate Hall, 100% owned top 100, 966 top 1,000, and then Ruby Tripodi, 83 and 758. I think that those 3 players are not players you're trading out at this point of the season. Ruby Tripodi is probably not like an uber primo at this stage, but she is close enough to top 5 where I just don't think it's worth a trade unless you've got something cooking. And it's going to have to be super speculative and you've not got a lot of other options to try and trade her out. I just don't think it's the right way to go.
Yeah, I think her scoring has slowed, but she's still putting up pretty consistent 60s. And to me, that's pretty gold for a forward at this stage.
Well, hold on, guys. I traded her out 2 weeks ago and it's only cost me 55 points so far.
Damn,
so,
why did you do that?
She scored that 30. I thought she was tired. And then she bounced back and did really, really well.
Beans.
Ships in the night, trading decisions. Who knows why they're made?
As we've often said on this podcast.
This fantasy thing, it's not about points. It's about having fun.
Yes, by gaining points.
By scoring points. Yeah.
So,
not familiar with the concept.
Those are probably the skeleton of almost every team in the top 1,000 are those 3 players. The next way we're going to talk about is I'm going to talk about them in like line by line, but we'll just run through in 2 different buckets, which is the 50 and 80% owned, which is most teams, and then the 20-50%, which is like the common players across there. I'm going to start with defenders. There is actually a very wide spread in the 50 to 80%, which kind of speaks to the fact that there have been a lot of options that have just scored at around about that high 60s, low 70s mark that people have just been trading in throughout the year. They've either started the season cheap or gotten cheap. So Sinead Goldrick's in 79%. And at this point, I'm just going to use kind of offhand, but 79% for Sinead Goldrick, Dizzy Darcy 60%, Serene Watson 60%, Charlie Thomas 55%, Ailish Sheeran is in 53% of the top 100, but only 37% of the top 1,000.
Yeah, you'd assume that's going to be climbing as well.
And then and then in the common bracket, we got Ruby Slasher at 47% and Maddie Newman at 28%. Out of those 2 buckets, which is the player that you're most keen to trade out?
That is a great question.
Mel, do you have someone you're specifically targeting?
Well, because I've got Sinead Goldrick and Daisy Darcy, and I was asking myself this exact question. I was like, they're both quite similar in price. Both of them you could make an argument to trade out, and if I'm going to trade out one of them to get some cash and upgrade my midfield, which one is it? I don't know. I mean, I don't like the idea of trading out Goldrick because I only just traded her in. But I'm thinking it's going to be Goldrick. But I'm keen to hear from you guys. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Goldrick is probably the main option. Her scoring has dried up, which usually is a good indicator of needing to be traded out. Dizzy Darcy had a shocker this week. We know that. But prior to that, had not dropped below 70 since round 4. So do we think this is just a blip?
I think it could be an injury. Buckled her knee. So she's had injuries at multiple times this season. Almost all of her bad scores have been down to injury, low time on ground. She'd had a little bit less time on ground when she'd been a full-time midfielder, as opposed to spending more time at half-back. She's got absolutely mountains of tape on both her knees and I think one elbow, and then clearly buckled her knee at some point in the third quarter, came off limping heavily in a bit of discomfort, didn't come back on until halfway through the fourth quarter, did the world's wobbliest knee stability run test, fitness test on the sideline, managed to make it on I think she had a tackle and a handball after she came on in the fourth quarter. I think that it's going to be one of those ones where you're going to have to look at the injury report. Your hand might be forced and it may actually have to be dizzy.
Because the unfortunate thing is she plays on Saturday, where Goldrick plays on Thursday. So it's I could lock in. Well, I'm might not know with certainty. Might have to change my trades beforehand, which I don't like doing. Jono?
Well, I'd also say with Goldrick, just the reason why you might want to trade her out is that she's had 2 games under 50, her only 2 games under 50 for the season, and it's the 2 games that Olivia Purcell has been back in the team and back in that midfield. I think this might be a role shift.
The role shift midfield-wise had kind of happened, I think, the week before, or maybe 2 weeks. She'd kind of lost the CBA's time. But I think it's Melbourne are just better and don't need her to use the ball as much.
So it's
she was
Sorry.
She was pushing up into stoppage. I know she wasn't getting the CBAs, but she was still hanging around the midfield, and now they're just doing better in that area. They don't need her in there as much.
So we've almost got a more locked-in role change, which is definitely not leading to good scoring, versus a potential injury, but for an otherwise good scorer, that's a very hard decision to make. I almost want to go with trading out the more certain downfall in Goldrick and roll the dice on hoping that Darcy's okay.
I think that comes down to your bench cover then.
Yeah. I think you're also probably hoping if you're in the position where you got both of them, hopefully you can maybe trade out both of them and work some cash that way, but it's not ideal either way.
No. I think, though, that was I was looking at both of those as my trades. I've been trying to figure out what I can do if Dizzy's out or if I want to trade out Goldrick. Obviously, Dizzy's got about 50k more in her head, so it's definitely some more interesting trades as a result.
Well, the obvious answer is to bring in Sarah Verrier, so...
Yeah.
Yeah. On the flip side of this list, if you didn't have Isla Sheeran, I think I'd be trading into her as soon as I can.
She's going to be expensive after that price rise.
She's expensive for sure, but she was elite, and I think she's going to keep scoring well. If she can score that against a strong Melbourne side, I think she can do it against the Bombers and then the Hawks as well.
Yeah, I think that both of those games, particularly I think Hawthorn, that game style, I think is going to suit her down to the bone. I think, Sheeran would be my number one target. She's also the most expensive at 1.092 million, which is the most expensive any defender has been this year. Unfortunately, for anyone that doesn't own her. And I think it's a fascinating difference between her ownership in top 100 and top 1,000. It's a 16, 17% percentage point drop.
That's a great opportunity if ever I've seen one. If you're in the top 1,000 and you want to get in the top 100, she's your ticket.
Yeah, she could definitely buy, and she's going to be tough to get in, but I definitely think she should be a target. Now, for the midfielders, we've got Ash Riddell, Anne Hatchard, and Charlie Rowbottom, all of whom are between 70 and 80%. And then in the common bucket, we've got Jazz Garner 42%, Ali Anderson at 20%, and Moncon at 15%. Throwing it out to the group, who is the one player you're most considering trading out?
Oh, definitely Noffy after that disappointing one this week.
She was not a player that I named.
I think Charlie Rowbottom's the answer here. She looks like she's struggling, probably carrying some sort of injury. I think the season, like a lot of Gold Coast players, probably is looking forward to a bit of a rest at the end of the season.
Agreed. Her problem now is she's just gotten really cheap. She was at over 1.5 mil at one point, and now is at 1.113 million.
She's lost 350K for a reason, though.
Yeah. I've got a similar concern over a different midfielder in that position, and it's Ash Riddell, who I think at quarter time they were saying that she's had this foot soreness that she's carrying. And I think there's a good chance that after this week, North's going to think, we've got top spot locked away. Let's rest her going into finals.
Especially with a final round game against Gold Coast.
Exactly.
Yeah, they can really coast into their golden finals run.
And that last month as well, she hasn't put up a score of 100 since the first 5 weeks. Since then, it's all been 90s. And I think that's one where before the price drops too far, I'm considering jumping off.
Still 1.219 million. Like it's already tanked a bit. She was I think we paid like 1.45 million for her at the beginning of week 5.
She was more expensive than Ghana. And now she's not.
Yes, that is very disappointing. And do you know what's also fascinating is that I think you could make a case for trading out Anne Hatchard going up against North Melbourne, where her time spent forward of the ball, I think she will have the most difficulty scoring in that position in this matchup. She's probably going to have, like, I say a North defender. Any of North's defenders structurally is capable of curtailing Hatchard's impact. I just don't think she's the most important trade out in this bucket.
I guess the hard thing with any of these trade outs is if you're not keeping these three, who are you going to? Like, who would you actually trust over these final 2 weeks? It seems like a lot of players are tired. There's very few players putting up the big 100 scores that we saw earlier this year.
I think it's Ghana is the number one target, particularly if I don't know how Chelsea Randall's going to tag this week when she probably can't open half her face. And I think Ash McCarthy is in a great run of form, having now put up kind of 4 of her last 5 have been over 100, and the only other one was an 87, where I think she even lost 2 tackles after the siren as well. So, like, got close to 100 again. But yeah, you make a fair point. There's not a huge stack of targets for everyone to go and get. I definitely think that I'm a bit scared looking at my midfield, given I think that I trade out options at M2 through 5. But I think that's going to be a really fascinating discussion. And I'm sure one of the ones we've discussed will pop off and have a 120 this week. And we'll all sitting there going, yep, that's very much tasting like raw egg on our face. Talking about rucks, there's only 2 to talk about. They're in 44% of... So Ailish O'Dowd is in 44% of the top 100 and 58% of the top 1,000. Mimstrom 40 and only 21% of the top 1,000. I think at this stage it's like you've got Ailish O'Dowd, who rolled her ankle in the last 5 minutes of the game against Hawthorn. I think at this point, like we kind of can't have this conversation without talking about who you want to upgrade to. I'm assuming at this point, if you've got the cash, you'd be saying, like, almost as a priority, you'd want to trade at Ailish O'Dowd, going up against Fremantle this week, potentially with a dodgy ankle.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. The ankle injury really does sort of drive this one, because I think if it wasn't for that injury, I would have almost been saying if you can't reach Mimstrom, O'Dowd's fine, to be honest.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to dissuade people because I think Fremantle's not a terrible matchup. Like, Fremantle plays such a contested style. There's a lot of throw-ups. So even if Mimstrom is dominating, O'Dowd hasn't gone below 60 and she hasn't gone over 78. I'd kind of expect that to continue.
Here's my concern, just on game style and the way that Ailish O'Dowd plays. She gets a lot of her possessions and her follow-up work is not near the stoppage. It's actually like 20 or 30 metres further on because she just bolts. She sprints away and is like 2 hand passes away from a ball where she actually had already lost the hit out. The way that Fremantle play is very in close and congested. And I don't think that GWS are going to have those same opportunities. Whereas I think Hawthorn, they kind of have their feet in both camps. They very much like to try and chip it around and move a ball in space. They're also very adept at stoppages. And so I really worry that this could be the worst kind of matchup for Ailish O'Dowd. and could be a
Would you mind
floor
just
score.
repeating all of that stuff about Hawthorn again? I was really enjoying that. You just run
Jono,
it
you
back
have
for
gotten
me.
so many compliments out of me about Hawthorn this year.
I know, I've never had this happen
To
before.
dare
This
to
is
ask for
unbelievable.
more is gluttony. Go away. Rude. I think we'll probably have more of a discussion about some of the other trade-in targets because we've got some lined up in the other buckets. But yeah, I think if you've got Mimstrom, congratulations. That's a great ticket to your rank absolutely skyrocketing. If you've got Ailish O'Dowd, it's a match report. It's an injury report watch number 1. And then it's going, can I get to what I think are probably some limited targets?
Oh, guys, no, this is my strategy now. O'Dowd is injured and doesn't play. My backup ruck, Lauren Pearce, is also injured and doesn't play. So I get Boyle Carr.
Utility ruck.
Woohoo!
No, you don't get utility ruck anymore.
It's not
Oh,
a thing. It's not a thing. Also, I'm pretty sure you have Lily Pierce. Otherwise,
What did I
I'd be
say?
very
Lauren Pearce,
impressed
I'd be
by
like,
your
that's a
ruck.
great pick.
The wrong Pierce. The wrong L
interesting
Pierce
choice
ruck.
to just have her on
Yeah.
the bench.
Yeah.
Just in case.
I've got Lauren Pierce on the mind for something we might discuss soon. So
Yeah. So just moving across to forwards because we've got a lot of players to talk about. Courtney Hodder is the only one owned, but in the 50 to 80 bracket at 52%. And then Alice O'Loughlin is at 47, Bonnie Toogood at 36, Chelsea Randall at 31, Caitlin Gould at 29, and The Frizz is at 70% of the top 100 and exactly 200 teams in the top 1,000, so manages to clip into the bucket. I'm surprised by how behind the number for Bonnie Toogood is, given she was cheap, but she had a stinky matchup. Am I right in thinking that the number 1 trade-out target here is Ali Friswell?
I would say so. Other than Randall if she doesn't play.
Yeah, although,
God.
as we said, does sound like she will play. There's no structural damage. They are hoping she will play against North. And it helps that it's North. I think if this was next week, she's not playing round 10, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree.
So that is our kind of breakdown of ownership, kind of who are we going to be getting rid of. I think the run sheet had called it swimming against the current. I'm not sure who wrote that, but appreciated. Now we're going to the Boom or Bust
sorry,
pod
we're talking
section.
about the mainstream, and we're talking about swimming against the current. There's some metaphors in there that you just
Mainstream.
ignored in my
Isn't this
intro.
swimming with the
Jono,
current?
we are well past the 40-minute mark of this recording. Heaven forbid that I scrape over some of the details.
I feel like that's just called being in a rip. Just to
Yeah,
make your
I'm
editing
having a
even
real-
more fun, Liam. I'll just keep talking.
Real rip
nonsense.
moment here, trying to get to the next segment. Looking at some of the pod players that we think that are maybe below 10% owned inside of the either top 100 or top 1,000. We'll start off with defenders. Mel, I think, are you willing to put your hand, are you willing to kind of fight for Gabby Newton as being one of the best options, or are you going to hoard her for yourself?
Nah, she's terrible. Don't bring her in. Those 6 people in the top 100 don't know what they're talking about. 102,
Yes.
not going to do it again. But Eileen Gilroy, I mean, she looks like a great pick.
Gilly. Shush, that's
Gilly.
my pod. Go away.
Gilly.
There's a big price difference, which I think is going to be the difference here.
Yeah. I think Gabby Newton has isolated herself as an unaffordable defender. I think if you've got the 1 point something mil, then you're probably bringing Nala Sheeran because, I mean, actually, if you want a pod, it could work, but you probably want to avoid the slippage and bring in Nala Sheeran because she has good ownership already, but less owned in the top 1,000.
Agreed.
Yep.
Jono, Will, have you got anyone else you want to fight for?
I'm not sure if there's anyone I want to particularly fight for. I wouldn't have said I'm a big fan of Gilly Gilroy.
Pacifism.
I guess it just sort of depends on if you want to try something a little bit different. Jade Britton's had a really good season. Other than one randomly very low score 2 weeks ago, scored another 70 this week, priced at only 620. Could be a point of difference to also save you a bit of money if you are trying to reach someone like a Sheeran, but yeah, there's a lot of players all around a similar mark in the back line, so I'm not going to necessarily throw that one as a you got to do it if you're looking for it, but just one to put in your back pocket as a potential option if you're looking for a little bit of money.
And if you do bring her in, you'll be joining Kiwi 5, who has such a stacked team that Jade Britton is sitting at D6.
Oof.
Yeah.
So that's
Wild.
a truly
Wild.
stacked team.
Inspirational.
I think if
Thank you,
anything, that
Wilfred.
really just says how good a pick that is. That the best player in the competition's like, I'm just going to sit her on my bench. That's how good she is.
Yeah.
I've also had a similar player, Harriet Cordner, for me. That Carlton backline seems to rotate who
Peggy.
their distributor or kicker seems to be every other week. And right now it's Harriet Cordner, and Carlton's got a good couple matchups coming up. So I think that's something that I'm intrigued by.
So the probability that's Harriet Cordner again 2 weeks in a row?
Well, that's the thing. They do them in runs of 3. You know, you look at Gab Pound scoring; it's kind of 3 on, 3 off. At the moment, it's really off, which is why she's not here. I think Cordner might be on for a couple.
But
It
the
feels very
determination
risky.
there, Karen Peterson looks to have done, I think, an abductor injury, looked in a lot of pain, played only the first half in defence, went off halfway through the second quarter, was on the wing in the third quarter, looked in a lot of pain, and then played in the forward line in the fourth quarter, again in active discomfort. Her not playing allows Pound, Cordner, and someone else I think you can take a stab at, owned by only 2 people in the top 1,000 in
Lawson
Kira
Cannon?
Fitzgerald, who is
Yeah.
720k, so cheaper than
You say
Cordner.
the 3 of them, but 2 of them scored over 80, and one of them scored 25, and that was Gab Pound.
Yeah,
which is
but
why I
Gab
haven't
Pound
put her
has
on the
scored
list.
over 80 this season. You
It would
make
take
a
a
fair
brave coach. It'd take a brave coach.
It would take a brave coach, but
That's
I
what
think
we're here for. That's what
we're
we're here
in
for.
brave areas. If you can't go above 500k, I've got one name written down, and that's Lauren Butler. She's not playing in defence.
Collingwood's full
forward.
forward.
Yes,
Yeah.
but Collingwood go up against Carlton this week, which is a great spot for full forward.
True.
Moving across the midfielders, we've gone different buckets here, over 1.1, over 800k, and then under 800k. Is there anyone else screaming out as like a big pod to target in the over 1.1 bucket? Throwing this out generally.
I think the one that I'm excited by is Emily Bates, and this is my Hawthorn side speaking.
Woo.
But
Oh, I
The thing
didn't
here-
know there was another side.
yeah.
Bates M1.
Look,
Bates
Yeah,
M1.
Batesy
I know
M1,
she's
I
put
was
up a
about to
lot of
say that.
she's put up a lot of 60s this year, but she's had 2 scores over 100, and they were the tough games for Hawthorn. So against Adelaide, which we lost, she put up 100, and against the Giants, which I know that that's a little bit different, but it's the only game we've been losing at half time in a while, and that she put up 127 this week. She is an enormous game player, and I think Melbourne is going to be a tough game. Richmond's going to be a tough game. I think she's going to show up in a big way.
Now is a really expensive time to bring her in because she just went up 150 grand.
I mean, you got to pay for the best, right? This is Emily Bates we're
Cough up
talking
for
about.
M1.
Just want to contest something. Is just Jono, just confirming Hawthorn maths, is 16 bigger than 15?
Yeah.
Yeah, because Hawthorn was 16 at halftime and GWS was 15.
Okay. We were about the same.
Sorry.
We're usually ahead by a mile at halftime. Don't worry about it.
Just the galactic levels of smug. I think the only concern I might have is Shelley Heath running a role on M. Bates this week. I had on air questioned whether that was going to happen, and it looks like she spent a lot more time in the midfield. I would not be shocked if that is the player to target, and Melbourne have been very good at doing that in the past. Will, is there someone you wanted to spruik?
Yeah, I've gone for someone who's dropped 2 70s in the last couple of weeks, which is Ella Roberts, a player who a lot of people are big fans of. Just lost a stack of money. Long season, could be tiring, but we know how good a player she is, so might be the cheapest you can get, and currently only owned by 7% of the competition. I don't have the...
3 top 100, 46 top 1,000.
There you go. So she's a player that is currently a bit of a pod. So she's a player that I have considered bringing in as a row bottom sideways this week.
I think that's not a bad call. Someone on here has written Zali Goldsworthy in this bucket, and as someone who owns her, I would delete that immediately.
Oh,
Her role
Ripperino.
is stinky. There are ancient French
only good thing
cheeses
about
that
it-
are envious of how stinky that roll is. It is horrendous.
The only good thing about it is we should hopefully get Zali Goldsworthy as a forward next year.
Yeah. Sorry to unload there. I've got a lot of pent-up anger on
Yeah, I know. I only
on that
wrote
roll.
that there to get you worked up because I'm actually doing McCarthy because I think she's on good form. She's a little bit more highly owned, but it's her or Roberts that I'm tossing up between, but, stick with the best team in WA, so...
The one player I wanted to spruik is Claudia Whitford. Only 9 people in the top 1,000, so under 1%. She's got a Port Adelaide matchup this week where I think she can score well, and probably a North Melbourne team that are going to be resting a bunch of players. She looked good up against Sydney. Didn't exactly have a massive score, but we know that she's got a ceiling. That's the
Still scored an 88, which is pretty good coming back from
pretty
concussion,
solid
so-
coming back from concussion. I think that's the player I'd want to take a stab at now. Kind of combining the 800, basically the rest of the competition. I think having a look at our run sheet, it's basically any midfielder from Collingwood who have the best run to finish the season with Collingwood and Melbourne. Am I correct
Carlton
in saying
and Melbourne,
that?
in fact. I'll correct you by saying they are not playing Collingwood, they're playing Carlton.
Carlton and Melbourne. Yep, that's great. I can definitely read words. So that is Britt Benici, who's a bit more expensive, but Sarah Rowe and Tani White are both kind of below that 1 mil mark. Tani White, and I think they've both had scores over 100 so far this year. We just saw Jess Fitzgerald and Izzy Pritchard put up their best scores of the year up against Carlton. I think they'll go great. Anyone else that someone would like to spruik?
I've been a big fan of Lucas Rod off halfback recently, and I think she could go well against Melbourne and the Tigers, but yet to see. I think for the price...
They've definitely sort of taken a lot of those Tam Smith points in that backline. I like the role that they are playing as that halfback defender, and they have continued to accumulate. So I'm not against the Lucas Rod pick as well.
Yeah, I just worry about the matchup against Richmond. A lot of matchups for Richmond for defenders. You're forced to be accountable. I don't think that TLR at any point had to play accountability football against GWS, and that's not an indictment of the way they play defence. It is an indictment on GWS.
That's fair. I do think that she is the last player in our backline. Sorry, that they're the last player in our backline that we would make accountable. Like, they're the first to run off every time.
I think it's more just like a shape thing and like the way that they control the space and the ground. Like, GWS just allow you. They're just like an open door at like a Wild West like saloon. They just swing in the wind. I definitely think that TLR is a solid option. I also think that Jess Fitzgerald and Izzy Pritchard, they've got 2 great matchups, St Kilda and Fremantle. I think I'm particularly interested in Jess Fitzgerald, who's probably the better player when the game gets real messy to score well. She's looked great since she's gone back in there from defence. Moving across to the rucks, this is the Ailish O'Dowd question. You've got Ailish O'Dowd, who are you trading to? We've got written down for upgrades, Talia Hickey, Poppy Kelly, Matilda Schultz, and I think we can throw the Wales sisters both in there. Who is the one player that you are targeting most if you can afford them?
Mim Strom.
That is, again, you're going buckets above, Will.
I think if it wasn't for the slight ankle tweak on the weekend, Matilda Scholes would be my number 1 target here.
Unfortunately, it might have been, I think it might be knee bruising. The way she talked about it, I would not be surprised if it's a bone bruise, which is not ideal for rucks. I don't know if it's on the knee that she often leads with in ruck contests, but I tend to agree with you. She's been the player that I've for 2 weeks have said, if you can afford to trade Ailish O'Dowd out now, Schultz is the player to do it with.
I want to give a lot of props to Poppy Kelly because I think incredible season and hasn't gotten enough credit. And I also think with the unfortunate injury to Katie Brennan over the weekend, that it probably means Tamara Luke slides into the forward line if a little bit more. And I think Poppy Kelly would have even more ruck minutes. So I think this can only be good. It's a good run to finish the season. I think fairly solid option. I think I'm considering it.
Yeah, because she's about 130, 140k more expensive than O'Dowd. The question is just, has she got that ceiling? Because O'Dowd scored 70 on the weekend, albeit in a good matchup. I think if I'm only doing that if there's like O'Dowd has a test on the ankle, we're concerned that she might not play or she'll be hobbled. Or if we get to teams and we see that Fleur Davis or Courtney Murphy is named in the ruck alongside her, might take the ceiling off. I also think that you can make... Talia Hickey has an incredible run. She's got Sydney this week and then follows it up with St Kilda. Just probably not a ceiling scorer in the ruck, unfortunately. But if that's all you can afford, I'm not going to begrudge you doing it. Mel, do you want to spruik for the kind of cheaper downgrade option in Lauren Pearce, given you said you've already got her on your bench?
Oh, yeah. She's a great bench warmer. I would recommend. No, I was just snickering to myself about if all you can afford is an upgrade in your ruck who is 100 and something grand more expensive than O'Dowd. I was like, to have the privilege. I will be sticking with O'Dowd unless it's dire, and then in which case Lauren Pearce gets subbed in as my R2.
I think, Jono, you'd written down Lauren Pearce as the downgrade target. What's your thinking there?
Yeah, basically back from the injury, so someone that I think will probably put up in the 70s is what I would expect. So if you're worried about the injury, this is someone I think you can rely on. Coming back from injury, she had pretty low time on ground, and I'd expect that to go up this week. So I think I wouldn't be worried about the low score she had in her first game back. They've got a good run. I think Lucy Wales generally is a good matchup, even though she's a very good player.
I think it's more
and then they finish
game style based. I think Hawthorn just have a lot of like contests.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the same against Collingwood, where Sabrina Frederick, I don't know, has had a quiet last few weeks from what I've seen. And yeah, I think when she's not the main ruck, then I think Lauren Pearce will get a lot more of the ball as well. So I think a good couple of weeks if you wanted to go pretty much sideways, because I think there's only about 20k between them.
That's a very good option. I like it, Jono.
Is that the sound of click potential trade in?
Oh, don't worry. We've been doing a lot of clicking already. You're welcome.
Always appreciated. Now, I see on some of the run sheets written Lauren Bella. I have no idea who's written it there, so I don't know who to throw it to. Is someone want to spruik for that, or is that a speculative get there if we get there?
Was that me? Yeah, that's Specky.
Okay, well, I won't throw to you on that one. And then in terms of under 500k.
Can I go super specky one back? Because we didn't talk about midfielders under 800k, and I have the speckiest pitch that I wanted to do.
Okay,
for Jenna Bruton.
Shoot.
All right. North have got Adelaide this week. Big game. Could be challenged for the first time this season since Geelong. And if their midfield is not working, I think Jenna Bruton is the first person they throw in there. And if Ash Riddell does miss the following week, Jenna Bruton's the first person they throw in there. I think for someone who's so cheap in the midfield and has put up 120 scores before, seriously specky, but one that I think could pay off.
I like the lateral thinking. The thing I might contest is I think that Amy Smith is probably the next midfielder that goes in.
Well, who takes Amy Smith's position?
She's a wing.
It's all upgrades from where Bruton is.
It's a wing.
It all slides up.
I don't think Jenna Bruton's going to the wing. If Jenna Bruton was 5 years younger, yes. But I think they're already managing her game time. She's played 67% against Essendon.
I mean, she's 29. There are far older players playing midfield in the league.
She's so injured.
She's definitely coming off an Achilles, and that shows.
But I do I think that's if we're going super risky, I think that's absolutely the thinking to take. Player has played midfield before, has an uber high ceiling. I can't fault the internal logic. I think...
You know what, Jono? You might have sold me.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Of course.
Look,
of
for
course.
677k, you're not finding a better midfielder.
No,
That's all I'm saying.
You're probably not in that range. Moving across to the forwards, at the over 800k bucket, I think I just want to spruik for Aisling Maloney. She has been spectacular this season. If you listen to any other podcast that suggests that she was better last season, I would just like to say I don't agree. I think she's been incredible this year, and is doing it without as nearly as well-established forward line. And the fact that Geelong have West Coast this week, I don't think they've got a matchup that can go with her. I do not believe that anyone at West Coast is capable of going her. I think Beth Schilling has the size and some of the aerial capability and is probably missing about 3 yards of pace. So if you can afford to bring in Aisling Maloney, who's only 4% owned in the top 1,000, that'd be where I'd be looking.
I reckon there's a chance West Coast try and do what they did against Anya McDonough and put Emma Swanson on her, and I think they're going to run into exactly the same issue for why that didn't work.
Size matters.
Mm.
Anyone else? Well, I've seen someone that's written on here who is at 0.3% owned in the top 1,000, and I'm keen to hear your spruik.
Yeah, this was originally Jono's long shot from about 2 years ago, and I have fully gotten on board. Charlie Mullins, going to be a star of the future, has been playing that sort of Sophie Conway role that we were sort of familiar with Sophie Conway playing, where they played sort of half forward, bit of time around the wings. She's looked sensational this year. Basically has been flip-flopping between scoring 50s and 100s. If you're looking for a very lowly owned player who can score very, very well, Charlie Mullins is your girl.
Yep. She is unfortunately off the back of some excellent form, and so is a fair bit more expensive at the moment. She's sitting at 876k, which, if I have a look at just forwards, that'd be F4. So it's very much
a meteoric rise this season. My God.
Well, she's put together some great scores. She had 104 3 weeks ago, and then's gone 51 and 79. Been in some stellar form. I can't disagree. Moving down now to the 500 to 800k buckets. Anyone would like to spruik? I'm assuming we're all going to stand behind Ash Saint being a good target, given half of us tried to trade her in last week and then got sidetracked.
No, I can't do it in good faith.
I'm a big fan of Ash Saint, but I think the one that I want to talk about is Jackie Dupai, because has finally bounced back. It was a very slow start to the year, but has had 370 scores in her last 4. So I think with the slightly easier run that the Gold Coast have had in the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping that can be a strong finish to the season again.
Yep. I think the big question will be how does she match up against North in week 10?
Yeah.
Port Adelaide feels like a perfect
they'll
game
be
for
getting.
her.
Yeah.
But she does drop behind the ball
I've been
a
thinking
bit.
about just Port.
If she
this week, great
goes
pick.
behind the ball against North, I reckon it actually could be her highest score of the year. I don't think that the matchup in that case is actually too bad.
It's just a question of when do they put her behind the ball and do they actually try and win? Because I have a feeling that old Joycey might be trying to save his job. Just quietly.
In a win against North.
That would save the job.
Yeah.
That would save the job.
That'd
That'd be a bloody good effort.
I think that's his last game if he doesn't, if they don't win, one of the next 2, I think it's to save his job. It's his 4th season. I don't think that's an outrageous statement. The one player I want to put my name behind is Imi Barnett. Carlton and then Melbourne. She's the part of the reason why Sabs Frederick has been quieter. Barnett's been rucking a little bit more. She's at 588k, owned by only 1.2% of the top 1,000. If you are like me and you think that you may need to trade Michaela Pounga out of your F5, it is an affordable hop, skip and jump up if you make some shrewd trades elsewhere.
And Mel can probably attest that she looked really good against Adelaide. It was probably one of her best games for the club and was marking really strongly, was getting around the ground. So I don't mind this option.
I don't know. I agree, and I value Mel and Will, your vision of football. I don't know how much I love the pod that I'm suggesting being given the Will seal of approval, because it's gone one of two ways. There is no medium ground where it goes very well, where it goes medium well. It's either going Chelsea
all or
Randall
nothing,
from 2
baby.
seasons ago, or it's going Sarah Veria from every season.
Hey, Sarah Veria is a staple of my team right now, so
That is it. That is
It's
a good
not his
point.
fault. Look, he signed a long-term contract with her. He's got to honour that, you know?
exactly.
And look, she has flashes. She has moments. This is far too much Sarah Veria talk for this late in the podcast recording. I think the other player that I just want to quickly mention, Taylor Smith, take a gamble with Dakota Davidson out the side. She may be able to kick some more goals. Is there anyone else? Anyone wanted to spruik? I see another name in the run sheet.
Hartwig is also a 0-1 like Jack Tupai. She had a great game last week, obviously, with the Carlton game there of 84 points, but I think she was able to show her potential, and if they come into a relatively easy matchup with St Kilda, she could be another one that goes decently well, given she's only 620k, is an option in that bracket.
I
fun to
like the
watch.
thinking. I definitely want to watch, and follows perfectly on to one of the players I want to talk at, under 500k, also from the Bulldogs, and she's going to get a boost the same way I think Twiggy will get a boost, and that's Annalie McKee if Alice Edmonds is out. She looked like she'd done a high ankle sprain and or knee, looked in severe discomfort, wasn't putting any weight on her knee/leg at all. Annalie McKee is probably the only other player that the Dogs can run through the ruck, probably rucking up against Emily Fiedler this week. Finishes the season with Mim Strom, but I think that if you're needing to take a stab and almost downgrade a lot at F5 for someone who can maybe score a 40 or a 50 this week at 300 and something odd K, I think Annalie McKee's the ticket.
I feel like we've really gone full circle with that one.
I know,
It really has.
but I would not want to touch her as a forward. It's the ruck role that I'm like, because she took all the CBAs basically after Edmonds went out early in the fourth quarter, is kind of the reason why I'm suggesting it. The only other name on here, and I don't know who's written it down, is Mia Austin. She is 0.1% owned, top 1K. I'm going to need a justification.
Yeah, look, that was me. I think this was more around Carlton's end of the season. I'm a big believer in Mia Austin. I think she has great potential as a forward, not necessarily as a fantasy scorer, but I think this is the time of year when young forwards come out and just do something. And I think against Collingwood this week, I think is a good shout. This is only in the instance that you are desperately looking for a cheap forward. I wouldn't be doing this unless it was just how your trade's structured out. But I don't know. I've got a good feeling about Mia Austin.
I love it. I think that that's the kind of stab that you have to take. I think this is, if you're taking it from the deep, you're trying to really, bankroll a trade. Like, you've got someone that we think have to be traded out in the forward line. Like, if you've got a Chelsea Randall, you like the rest of your forwards and you want to bank mega cash to finance double upgrade midfield and defender or ruck or whatever, and you're coming from well back of where you want to actually finish, I think this is the type of trade that you make.
Yeah, I can make nearly 200k from Zali Friswell. That's great.
Yeah.
I
think that is definitely what I'm considering as well with Annalie McKee. I think that's the kind of risk I might have to take from a Michaela Paunga to finance things elsewhere. Now, that is the end of our bumper hot topic section. Got to quickly throw to myself in Captain's Corner. Noffy is at number 1. Unsurprisingly, even against North, I think that's the type of matchup she'll really appreciate. We saw some good scores from Maddie P and from Jean Nanscorn on the weekend. At 2, I've got Mim Strom going up against either Ailish O'Dowd or Fleur Davis or Courtney Murphy. She could score 140. At 3, I've got Aisling McCarthy. We've just seen a great score from Emily Bates. I think Fremantle are going to play the way they're going to be able to dictate the way the game goes, and they're basically doing that predominantly with Ash McCarthy this year. I think she's on for a big one. The player that will benefit from that almost immediately is Elise Parker, who loves to play the way that Fremantle plays. I think Elise Parker would average over 105 if she played for Fremantle this season. And she's in some red-hot form. And then at 5, I've got Jasmine Garner. Even going up against Adelaide, I just get the sense that she'll bob up for a couple of goals and be on the tackles again. I don't think they're going to manage her time at stoppage or in the forward line or on the bench. This is a game that North Melbourne, to lock in number 1 spot on the ladder, they're going to want to try and go as hard as they can. So that's my top 5 for this week. I just think at this stage, you're just putting the C on Noffy, and then we'll talk about it next week as an interesting option. Now, trade plans going forward. I'm going to try and keep this super brief. Mel, what's your number 1 priority, and what's your point of weakness?
I will be aiming to get in the top 1,000. So it's making the smartest trade moves that I can with my very limited money. It's an annoying point to be at because I know a lot about fantasy, shockingly.
Don't sell yourself short.
Oh, all right. But I look at my team and I'm like, what? Like, there's so many things I would do instead, but I can't because I'm limited by only doing 3 trades on a crap team. So it's getting pretty frustrating. It's like, I know these aren't good players. I know they're not going to score well, but I can't do anything about it. So is trade, just make the most of what I can and trade in some players that I know are going to do well with the points that I have. And ideally, they're a little bit specky as well. My point of weakness, though, is that, my point of weakness is that I can't be making good or bad options because that requires having multiple options. And I'm very limited in my options given how little cash I have on the bank and no cash gen options. And so at least I can't be my own worst enemy in terms of who I trade in. I'm a bit locked up there. I can't break the bank and get strong.
I feel you there. That has summarized how I've felt looking at some of my trades. Like looking last week and going, I have too many problems to fix to bring in all of these players that I think will do well, and making the same mistake. Jono, same thing. What are your priority? What's your point of weakness?
Yeah, look, Mel and I, being 20 ranks apart, have very similar problems. But I suppose what I'm prioritizing is ceiling. I had 4 midfielders score under 90, most of them 87, and almost all of my forwards, bar Kate Hoare, were underneath 52. It's shocking. It doesn't matter at this point if they score badly because they're already scoring badly. So I'm just trading in players with a high ceiling. That's my number 1 trade priority.
I like it.
Good call.
I need to go. My point of weakness is that I need to go so high risk to climb 400 spots in 2 weeks. This is going to get really messy. This is going to go really well or really, really badly. And I can't wait to see which way.
I actually take it back. My primary objective in the rest of this season is not to finish top 1,000. It is to finish higher than you, Jono.
Oh, I knew it. I knew that was coming.
I think that's a great goal. Will, you are the most prepared this week. You've already got your number 1 trade priority locked in. What is it? And what's your point of weakness?
Well, my number 1 trade priority is trading Garner to Mullins because I want to. And my point of weakness is the rest of my team. I've got a lot of players that aren't scoring very well, and that's not doing me very good. I think one of the things I've unfortunately identified for me this year is that I have a very unique backline that is solid but not spectacular. So I'm missing out on these sort of ceiling players. I obviously don't have Sheeran. I'm missing a lot of the other, key backline players that have really helped people. And it's just frustrating because they're not desperately needing to be traded out, but they're not really helping me do that much better in the team.
You have a Brenna Tarrant backline. Both
Brenna Tarrant has been...
And it just encapsulates your defense.
Brenna Tarrant has been far from my worst player this year.
She's just been a very player in your defense this year. Very emblematic.
She's arguably been my MVP in the backline, and that probably speaks to the problems itself.
Yes.
But yeah, basically, I'm looking. Do I trade O'Dowd? Do I bother if she plays? Do I trade Rowbottom to Roberts? There's so many permutations of what could be. Are any of them going to help me? Probably not. But you know what? We're going to give it a crack. And all going well, I'll beat Mel and Jono because, that's definitely something that's within the realms of possibility.
Testify. Will, I've actually just heard from AFL House that you're getting an extra week of double game weeks. And so you can score up to 1,900 points this week to make up all the points that you are behind Mel and Jono. I definitely feel you on the millions of permutations. I don't have a number one trade priority this week because I think that my trades are going to be defined by injuries. I've got Darcy, I've got O'Dowd, I've got a bunch of other injury concerns in my squad. Ash Riddell, I just don't know what I'm going to be able to do. And so my point of weakness is not going to get locked into my trading options too early until I know injuries and teams so that I don't force a trade that is dumb in light of new information.
Liam, can I suggest a number one trade priority for you this week is actually do your trades?
That's a good one. That's a really good one.
Great idea, actually. Are you casting nasturtiums in my direction because I forgot to do them for the Tamara Smith team?
Nasturtiums.
Yeah, I wouldn't say nasturtiums, given that feels like a new word to me, but...
Casting nasturtiums. Have you never heard that before?
Probably from you. I don't think you never catch me saying that sentence.
It is a daggy dad phrase change from casting aspersions, which is the actual phrase, and the nasturtium is a type of flower, yes.
I'm so glad you clarified that because that went straight over my head. Yes, that's what I'm doing.
Quality chat to finish up the episode there, everyone.
As always.
Excellent. Gosh. Well, I hope everyone's enjoyed that episode. It's been a great chat. We have probably talked about more players and more options this week than we have in several other weeks because of the double game weeks. I've had a blast. I hope you all have as well. As with every other week, please make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast, Free Kick W Pod, on all the different platforms. Importantly as well, Jono and I will have our article out. It will probably be out or around about the time of this episode, releasing with all of our kind of ins and outs of the trades for the week, captains, and downgrade targets. Now, you can find me on Twitter at LiamAFLW Fantasy if you want to hear my thoughts about football and otherwise. Jono, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at FreeKickJono.
I'm on Twitter as FreeKickMel.
And I'm at FreeKickWill.
And you can join us on Nasturtium Chat next week when we go into the final week of trades. And until then, happy trading, everyone. See ya.
We need to bring back flag chat.
See ya.
See ya, everyone.